This is sort of Ghibellini adjacent material. It's Strauss, Heidegger. Um, I want to make, call it an analogy, um, rather than a simile. Um, I'll see if I can keep to it. Partly it's just a rigmarole, but partly I'll try to see how much I can think it through. If the metaphor is transfer of meaning, um, analogy is then um, a widened metaphor where the transfer of meaning is um, relates to agreement between topics. Um, so the first topic is going to be um, the problem of the move from ancient realism to the realism of the realism of Marx, which is supposed to be the final reversal of philosophy, which uh, Heidegger probably says more firmly than Strauss, but Strauss kind of follows it. The same thing is just as much an end of philosophy in Nietzsche as in Marx. Nietzsche and Marx both are coterminous. Strauss uses sort of formulas like whatever it is that comes after philosophy, that's what Marx is doing. And he's much more interested in Nietzsche than in Marx. Although he did do a seminar course that's available on the University of Chicago website on Marx. Whereas Heidegger says much more firmly, here's the final reversal of philosophy, both in Marx, and here's the last ontic philosopher, Nietzsche. He also calls Kierkegaard ontic. So the first one thing we're trying to do is show what ontic means in Heidegger, and that should be, so it touches on what Ghibellini's getting at in that we want to say, what is this notion of nature, which Ghibellini is bringing out in Strauss, because it's not the Cartesian notion, which we could, by shorthand, signal with the two tables of Eddington, the physics as against so-called daily life, or in the OOO type people usually just say at I don't know if they say human, but basically at our scale rather than at micro scale, and then they say, like Harman says, for instance, why do we privilege the micro scale above our own scale? That's his way of dealing with it. So it's commonly said that Aristotle was in some sense a realist, as against, the famous Michelangelo painting of the Aristotle's pointing down and the Plato's pointing up. But that means, so then I'll try to give a statement of what that would mean. And the analogy would be, the first part of the analogy is this whole structure around Aristotelian realism, which also links up to Plato and, let's say, in the Timaeus, because that's what everyone points to when they want to try to tell us what the modern notion of epistemology is about, that it starts with the problems of the Timaeus. I'm always I try to be very conscious of the fact that when you're doing dianoia, inwardly thinking rather than speaking, So remember, in the sophist, we get this opinion from the Eleatic stranger that logos and dianoia are the same, or speech and thinking are the same, but they differ in that speech is inner speech. Sorry, dianoia is inner speech, whereas logos is speech. In a way, I do both at the same time when I'm doing these videos because I'm just thinking out loud. But that shows that why that connection, why thinking and speech can be the same thing, according to that Platonic view, in the sophist. So in the Timaeus we get, of course, this, and Descartes is in a way, I mean, I guess Descartes is, I don't know if he must explicitly somewhere say the Timaeus, but anyway, he says in general everything I've said. He claims everything he said is already in the ancients. Partially that's false modesty. Hobbes calls him on that and says, yeah, you'll say that you're just repeating things that already happened before, but actually you're famous for all your new, they didn't use the word creative in those times, which is important for Strauss. It's a post-Nietzschean idea, but all your new discoveries is what you're famous for, not for this false modesty about that it's already happened before. And I think Hobbes is correct. So what I was trying to say before is I'm always conscious of that. There's so many times when you're thinking, you think of something for a moment, you go over the concept, but then it kind of just drops out of your daily thoughts, and it doesn't really affect the way you think. So it's like some things appear. Schopenhauer, for instance, says that this idea of necessary reason appears in some passages in Aristotle, but he doesn't really keep to it in the whole of his philosophy. He just kind of thinks of it on occasion or something, but it's only really kept to in modernity, especially in Leibniz. Fourth law of thought, the law of necessary reason, appears, but it's just like has a blip. In the same way, you can kind of see, you can superimpose Descartes over a lot of ancient thoughts, but it's not really there. But okay, so the idea of ancient realism is more like we assume that daily life is reality, but then there's just a question of errors, like in the Timaeus, that it could be a dream, like the Chinese thing about the butterfly, which takes it sort of makes a mise on a beam out of it. Butterfly dreaming a man dreaming a butterfly. But the point is, you go from reality to saying, oh, maybe it's a hallucination or a dream, but you accept that this is reality, the daily world that's standing still. That's the sort of ground of, if you want to call the ancients, say they had a version of reality. And then in the Catholics kind of say, yeah, there's something called consciousness, but it's sort of, they kind of take the same Timaeus type attitude. Yeah, we sort of assume it's giving us something accurate. I think then that's the biggest fact. In a way, that's the biggest fact in Heidegger. So that's kind of a strange way to introduce Heidegger, but in a way, that's the biggest fact in Heidegger, is that the fact that the earth is turning is a scientific truth, and it's totally proved, but it totally also shows that our normal way of looking at reality is wrong. But that's not really full. I mean, in Wittgenstein also, there's a stupid Wittgenstein movie where the only interesting thing I thought philosophically was that comment that the student is talking about the sun setting, and then it's like, well, what if we represented it as the earth turning instead of the sun setting? And then the actor playing Wittgenstein says, well, but what would the difference be? So it's kind of like, it wouldn't have any physical, scientific, or observable difference. It would just be the immediate sense of that's what we're seeing, not the sun setting, but the earth turning. It would be totally, there's no way to express that as a depiction or as a picture of how that change, what the change would be, or as an outward, as it were, difference. That's one of the sort of core things in Heidegger. This question of why is it more real to go with the scientific proofs than with the immediate proof of our actual being. But what the analogy I wanted to make here to show one of the problems of nature is that the problem of reality doesn't exist in the same way for the ancients. It's just that problem of hallucination or dream, whereas for the moderns the problem involves one, the thing of the earth turning, the other thing is the sensorium as the primary and secondary qualities, and this kind of question of, and then at length all the sort of Chalmers stuff and all that analytic stuff. But basically the hard problem of consciousness, blah, blah, blah. Daniel Dennett's kind of circle where he admits that you can't have direct consciousness, but it's probably good enough anyway because it functions, because there's kind of a circle between the sense data and the world as a representation. So anytime we're talking about the world as a representation, we're in German idealism, and the modern problems would start with asking, the basic question would be, say your eyes are the type that see color rather than the type that are black and white. Which one is more real? And then there's all these questions of which is more real. Where do you get to reality? That's the start. So you don't have that start in antiquity, and then so the question of nature would have to, even though of course in Strauss we're talking about nature as it's natural for a dog to wag its tail. If the dog didn't wag its tail, would that be a natural dog? So it seems like it's not, or if human beings didn't think it was strange for, I once experienced this, a younger, stronger man menacing an older, weak man. It seems just you instinctively think this is wrong and it should be put a stop to, right? That's the kind of thing Strauss was talking about. That some things are simply wrong, and it's about recognizing that. What does that have to do with the scientific versus what does that have to do with these other things? But that's part of what Strauss is getting at. And then he says, with Plato and Aristotle, where we only have the problem of realism is only this the type of problem I just brought out. It's different than what we have laid superimposed over on top of that with the German idealists, where we have this problem of what I just said, like what is reality in terms of we have a certain kind of eyes. We have certain some eyes see more colors than others. Some eyes see things as larger, smaller. If our eyes were different shapes, it would be like a telescope. Things would all look differently. And where's the bottom of that? Those type of questions. And that's part of what constitutes, I believe, a second cave for Strauss, working through these accrual of additional problems.